Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me and can you see charts? Okay, great. Let me just look up a couple of the questions I was told that I should answer today. I just need to find that email. All right, here it is. All right, so somebody wants to know about stops. And what else? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by continuation patterns, but anyway, let's get started. I really wanted to go over, some of the charts and also some of the material that can help you trade this work. But one of the things that's most important to understand is that I'm pretty much just giving you key support and resistance decisions that you can trade against, and ideally using a trigger that tells you that it's worth placing a bet. Okay, so for example, if you guys followed this one for a while, we did have a nice pullback into support in BABA a while back here. The zone came in 194.16 to 196.87. It was tested, it held, and it triggered, and it seems to be heading towards target number one. So target number one would be this 227.80 area. But what's going to tell you that you should take a trade against this area? Okay, and that's the triggers. So let's just go over this example real quick, and then I'm going to go and talk about some of the basics here. So let's see. Typically, if you're looking for a swing trade off an area, I'm waiting for either a 15-minute or a 30-minute chart trigger to fire off. Okay, this was, the low was made at 196.70. Okay. Actually, I think we want to look at the 15-minute chart. Okay, so here is where you actually pulled back into that support decision. It looks like 196.70 was the actual low in this case. And the chart on the left is just a 15-minute chart with the 834 EMA combo on it. And what I like to see before entering any kind of trade here is basically a moving average crossover to the upside after holding support, which you have here on the 834. Actually, you had one earlier too. And you also want to see it take out a prior swing high. So you also want to see it take out the high because it's basically showing you a shift in pattern from lower lows and lower highs that you saw into the support decision to now higher highs and higher lows. That would suggest that we might start rallying from that support. So the way to make money with this work, the way I like to put it, is setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. And that's pretty much all you need. And I'm going to show you some, details and trading plans that you can use to help keep you on the right side of this. So this was a setup. It did trigger on both the 15-minute and the 30-minute chart. It has not yet made a target. We're looking at a target at the 227.80 area. But since we don't always make our targets 100% of the time, you want to trail a stop up as you go. You do not want to leave your initial stop in, either below this low or below here. You want to trail it as you go. And typically what you need to do for that, that's part of the managing the trade, is you need to go to a lower time frame chart. And I will go over some examples, so that will help a whole lot more. Okay, so question is, what software would help you to see the 834 EMA? Well, the one that I was showing you, this is actually Thinkorswim, but I think most of the programs will allow you to put in, a crossover. And there's also, I think you can go to the studies, and let's see, add study, and you'll see where they have crossovers on this, and then you go down to the moving average crossover, and then you tell it, what you want to see. Oh yeah, here. So this is just painting an arrow, when there is some crossover here. Okay, now I don't think this yeah, I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at this, but you want to use the 834. At least that's what I use. If you want to use something else, the only thing that I would suggest, because you can use other combos, is to test it first just to make sure that, it doesn't stop you out that much. And yeah, just make sure that it works along with, what we're doing here. So that's one thing. Now, as far as the charts, and I'm getting a lot of questions where a lot of people don't really understand what I'm doing. And maybe, I guess, I can simply put, this is a setup, but I think pretty soon you'll understand more of what I'm looking for every day. Okay, but the setup, and then again, you want to watch your own triggers. And I know that you can get like signals from Thinkorswim, and I'm sure there are other charting packages that give you alerts. Yeah, that you might want to do. But let's look at what I have in my guidelines. Okay, so one of the things on the site that you might not be aware of, if you choose analysts and you choose my name and you go to the about section, and we're going to make this a little bit easier to find, but there is an about section. And here are some of the, beginning videos as far as, how to understand what the work is. Yeah, that's pretty much the introduction to the advanced Fibonacci time and price analysis. I also have the guidelines, how to, or actually I think this might be the video for the day trading plan, but I'm also giving you the files here in the handouts. Okay, so in the handout section, I've given you the guidelines, and I've given you the basic day trading plan and the basic swing trading plan. Okay, because you're going to use different triggers for, day trades versus swing trades. So here with the guidelines, okay, I think what's most important here is that, you pretty much know what I'm doing. I'm doing multiple price relationships, and I'm looking for, clusters and a couple of other things. And what I do is I run all possible price relationships on any particular chart, from, as many swings as I can, gather on the chart. And I want to identify one of three setups. Okay, so for example, well, there are three setups. So the first is a Fibonacci price cluster. So that is the coincidence of at least three Fibonacci price relationships that come together within a relatively tight range, and it identifies a key support or resistance decision. The other type of setup I'm looking for is a symmetry setup. Now, symmetry, you can have one line of symmetry, and that is a setup, and I'll show you that. We just had that happen in Beyond. So a symmetry setup can be one or more symmetry projections. And also within Fibonacci clusters, I would consider it a relatively strong cluster if there is also symmetry inside that cluster. Okay, and there's a way that you'll be able to tell that, because I did do a video on my YouTube page as far as, the colors that I'm using, the color codes. I basically want to see what is inside a price setup, so I can do that by just kind of looking at the colors. So symmetry setup, that would be the second type of setup, and then the third is still a Fibonacci price cluster, but there's a very specific types of relationships that I want to see. I basically want to see symmetry and a 1272 or a 1618 that overlaps, and another retracement. Now that, I'll have to see if I have a video on that one, because it's a little bit more difficult to understand, but it's, zigzag pattern. But for me, I want the symmetry within that pattern. So if I have any one of those three setups, you can look for an entry against it, okay? And again, one of the things that I said is the formula for success is basically trade setup plus a trigger equals the entry, and then you follow it up with your trade management, which includes defining your initial stop, and then deciding how you're going to trail it, along with any specific instructions to exit. Like, are you going to exit half of your position at the 1272 extension, or are you just going to, trail a stop and just stay in until the market kicks you out? It's your choice. Most of my traders are going to get out of partial profits if we meet a 1272 extension. Okay, and basically, the trade setups are identified every single day, and I run, I have some of those on the end of day video, but for a while, like, we haven't seen a lot of setups on the daily charts because we're still working off of those and ideally heading towards targets. So this is a document that you want to start with, as far as the, the guidelines and what you're looking for. One of the 3 setups for trade entries. And then as far as the trading plans, well, actually, I really have this on the other documents. So if you're going to look at, let's look at the basic day trading plan, because I've given a lot of examples. Let's see. Like in the video that I did yesterday, I gave you about 3 or 4 examples that show you entries that occurred with a 1-minute chart, which is basically, what you can use for day trading. Okay. Now, if you want to use different signals or something, that's fine. But just know that your definition of risk for any of these setups is either, like for the buy side, underneath the low that's made prior to your buy signal, or underneath the low end of the zone. Okay, so you always want to have the definition of risk in advance of taking the trade. So again, setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then manage it. If there's no trigger, don't take a trade. And again, identify the setup. Is it a price cluster setup? Is it a symmetry setup? Is it a 2-step pattern setup? Okay, and if it basically tests and respects the zone, for a trigger, you go to a lower time frame chart for an entry, as it will signal an entry closer to where your risk is defined. Okay, so these are the types of, well, you can use a daily chart, a 120-minute chart, a 30-minute, 15-minute, or 5-minute setups. And then for day trade decisions, mostly for stocks, using like a 1-minute chart for a trigger. But if you want to use something more like a 2-minute or a 5-minute chart, that's okay too. You just don't want it triggering so far away from where your definition of risk is. And then also, what I'm typically suggesting for any of the futures work, 377 tick chart that I use on Thinkorswim is typically what I'm looking at for an entry trigger, because it's going to get you in a lot closer to where the support or resistance decision is. Okay, so these documents I've uploaded, it's in the handouts, so you can mess with that. Okay, and then let's see. And then it also talks about, if you have the crossover and you take out the prior swing high, for example, so the initial stop for a buy setup, your first option, again, is to place a stop below the low made prior to the trigger firing off. The second option is to place a stop below the low end of the cluster. Okay, so either one is okay, just make the choice. And then let me actually look at, there's a couple of questions here. Yeah, so Thinkorswim definitely for, and I'm sure that there are TradeStation or TradingView and all of those other ones should also have moving average crossovers on it. Okay, what time period does MA 1, 2, 3, and 4 represent? Well, on a daily chart, then this is the 5, the 13, those are 2 EMAs, and then the 50 simple and the 200 simple moving average. That's what I have on the daily charts. Okay, and I believe that's somewhere in the guidelines. If it's not, then I've screwed up, but that's what it is here. Now on the intraday charts, it's going to be an 8 and 34. Okay, so the daily charts and the weekly charts and anything higher than daily is going to be, the 200 and the 50 simple and the 513 EMAs. Otherwise, it's the 834 EMAs on any of the intraday charts. Well, you know what? As far as TD Ameritrade, when you log into your TD Ameritrade account, it should allow you to download Thinkorswim. There shouldn't be any issue with that. I mean, that's what I've been doing. Okay, another question, do I identify when there's a strong setup or any way to identify? Well, I'm so slammed in the morning, it's hard for me to add a lot more information. So I usually will talk about what might be higher probability in the end of day video. So you definitely want to watch the end of day video. And there's also the chart packet that sets you up, you know, that you go into for the next day. And then I update after that. But, you know, there's definitely a way to kind of decide for yourself. And I'll give you some good examples with some of the recent trade setups. Because, for example, in, let's say, Facebook. Now, a high probability trade is what I call a royal setup, basically. So it's where you have all of the moving averages on the daily chart on the right side, you know, to support your entry, and a symmetrical pullback. Okay, so this is exactly what we had this is a daily chart of Facebook. So we had the price when we pulled back into symmetry here. We had price above the 200, we had price above the 50, and the 5 and 13 has been in a buy mode since back here. Okay, so when all of those are supporting, you know, your trade in the direction of the trend, I mean, that's going to be one of the highest probability setups. Okay, now when it's not as high probability is, for example, I told you that I had decisions on both sides, and this has been a little bit more difficult to trade. This is Netflix on the daily chart, where we actually initially had the resistance. You know, we failed here, we held on a cluster here, then we had a hurdle we initially couldn't clear, but I said if we continue to hold above this low, that we could look for, you know, then a resumption of the rally. And typically if prices, well, here, over here, the 5 and 13 was not on the right side. We were above the 200 and pretty much, well, for most of the part, above the 50, but the 5 and 13 were not on our side. So that's going to be a lower probability setup than the one that has all of the daily moving averages on the right side. And also, you know, if you're looking at an intraday chart, so if you're looking at this 30-minute chart, well, it's a pattern of higher highs and higher lows, right? So on this time frame chart, you know, the buy side is going to be favored because it's a bullish pattern. Also, the 834 is in a buy mode here. Okay, you have the 8 above the 34. So that would be you'd focus on the trend trade setups. Okay, now if you looked at trying to short against, like let's say you're looking to short against this resistance in Netflix, because let's say we have an extension of one swing and a 100% projection of another one. It is resistance, but you have, looking at this chart, well, it's more of a counter trend trade on this time frame. Okay, because it's a pattern of higher highs and higher lows, not lower lows and lower highs. So I would consider this counter trend. It doesn't mean that you can't take a trade against it. You know, if you get a sell trigger against it and you just risk above this area, and there's nothing wrong with looking at that. But as far as taking it overnight, it might be a little bit more iffy because, yeah, at this point, okay, it doesn't look like the 5 is crossed back above, but you know, we're above the 200 and we're above the 50. So all I know is that I told you on the update that if we can push through this two-step pattern resistance, this is really a good example of a two-step. Actually, let's just, let me just do it like on a 120-minute chart or something. A little bit easier to see. Okay, and just let me just change this template. Okay, so here with this like zigzag pattern, notice that 100% of the first swing up comes in at 435.10. That just happens to overlap a 618 retracement back to the last high. And you also have an extension of this prior swing. So this is basically a two-step pattern. And we've got 435.10 to 435.63 as a key resistance decision. Now, if you can push through it, which, I kind of like to see that happen, then, we're going to look for the higher upside target up at this 475 area. But you still have to watch for a possible failure here, because I'm not going to tell you that I know that we're going to just continue to rally from this low towards this target, or if we're just going to do a two-step into resistance and roll over. This is probably a good question, though, for your Elliott wave guys, because honestly, I know a little bit about it, but I wouldn't be able to label anything on these charts. So I don't know if they would say that this is maybe a good turning point or not, but you can kind of match it up with what they're doing sometimes. I think that's what happened in the case of Roku, because someone kept asking me about Roku, and I said it's a counter trend trade, but I went ahead and did the work on it and it held. So for example, okay, that'll be on this workspace. So here's Roku. So I went ahead and I found two areas of potential support, but because price was underneath the 200, underneath the 50, and the 5 and 13 were still in a sell mode, I had to say that, hey, yes, this is a setup, but it's not as high a probability as when you have the moving averages on the right side to support the setup. You didn't have that in this case. However, it did still rally, and we knew that our risk was right underneath here. Okay, so anyway, if this is a more important low, upside potential is to 149.29. All right, let me see what other kind of questions we have here. And then I'm going to go over stops. How do I pick the best candidates? Well, honestly, I have a set, number of charts that I follow every single day. Okay, so you've pretty much seen them. Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, all those, Microsoft, and then I have what I call the bonus charts. So a lot of times, when we do the breakout sessions and you ask me to analyze something, well, if it's a really good setup, I keep it. And then I will continue to follow some of these to look for some other opportunities besides my basic, set of charts, which is, well, for the FMA, I do the S&P, NASDAQ, TLT, gold, and crude oil. And then for the stocks, the main stocks, I do Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Netflix, NVIDIA, Tesla, and Tesla. And then the extra charts, when I see something, it doesn't make any sense to really go over it, if there isn't an entry decision. But I do follow, I don't know, probably about 40 charts a day. All right. So as far as, the best candidates, I'll see if there's anything that sets up as far as, a price cluster, or I'll also look and see, well, is it one of those stocks that has all the moving averages on the right side? Because when it is, it's typically a pretty dang good setup. Beyond was a simple symmetry setup. Okay, so we had 116.28 as the support. Actual low is made at 116 even. I guarantee it triggered on a 1 minute, a 5 minute, a 15 minute, and a 30 minute. And it took a while. This is when it was boring, okay? But we finally met the initial upside target. So far that's a $44 rally off of what? A simple symmetry projection that you find from, just running or comparing swings in the same direction. And it can give you a move like that. let's see. As far as, the 834, I just wanted that for triggers because you're always going to use really a lower time frame chart for a trigger. And the reason why I wanted like the 200 and the 50 is because that's what, many traders are looking at. And also then the 513 is kind of a very good short-term decision. Now let me show you why I really pay attention to that. Apple is a phenomenal example. Okay, it helps you stay on the right side of the market, the 513. So see over here, we had a crossover to the upside. This would have maybe given you a head fake for one day, but otherwise, 5's above the 13 all the way here until here. Once that broke, it was vulnerable. So when you see a shift like with the 513, you definitely want to have a relatively tight stop or, just exit. Here, okay, when it shifted, notice that it didn't shift back to the upside until over here, the 5 above the 13. It helps you stay on the right side of the market. It's still 5 above the 13. So I know that I'm still in a mode because we're above the 200, above the 50, and the 5 and 13 are in a buy mode. I'm going to be buying pullbacks. And that's also what I've been doing in the indexes for the whole time. I mean, I'll tell you that I may have time resistance and even price resistance, but as long as this is still a bullish chart, actually you can see it here, we're above the 200, above the 50, 5 and 13 are still in a buy mode. I am still going to be buying pullbacks. Okay, maybe the shorter term pullbacks, maybe deeper pullbacks until this changes. And also, check out how this can also be helpful. Like here, you had a crossover to the downside. It didn't cross back to the upside until over here. But since then, I think we had one head fake right here. But that's, that's not a heck of a lot in this whole move. One head fake. So it helps you stay on the right side of the market. You're not always going to have it like that. I mean, just like I showed you the Roku setup, you didn't have any of the moving averages on the right side. But in my trading plan, I'm allowed to take what would be considered a counter trend trade because you didn't have any moving averages on the side of the bulls when you tested this support. You were below the 200, you were below the 50, the 5 and 13 were in a sell mode. Okay, yet I did have extensions of prior swings and I did have timing factors. So I had a few timing cycles that also suggested a possible low. And it started to work. Now we just have to clear some of these other areas of resistance. I already did the update. So you're going to have the Apple stuff on the update. Those were posted just before I got in here. I mean, we can look at it, but okay, yeah, again, so the moving averages on daily charts and higher, I use a 200 simple, a 50 simple, and then the 513 EMA combo. I mean, that's EMA. So this is what it looks like here. They're done with the close. This is, exponential. These are not, these are simple. And you do it with the closing bar. And then for any of the intraday stuff, so then this is just the 834. And again, it's in the guidelines. So you have that information in the guidelines. Let me see what else. Okay, question is, do I follow many of the same stocks that the other analysts do? I don't know. Okay, every once in a while, I'm so slammed during the day that, you know, every once in a while I watch the video that that Avi and Garrett do. Okay, but as far as the other stocks, no, it looks like they were also doing something in Roku, and you know, I'll see that here and there, but do I look for it? No, I'm slammed during the day. But if you want to tell me, you know, like when we do the Monday sessions where I do requests, and you want to have me look at something that they're also looking at, that's the time to ask. Okay, how do I, well, I'm not sure that I would, okay, let me show you, there's 3 different ways as far as the stops. Okay, so let's say you're in, okay. So if you're shorter term oriented and you know that we've met multiple targets on the upside, even though we do have higher targets here, I would typically tell you to use a lower time frame chart for stops. And then there's 3 different ways to do it. Okay, you can either, you know, look at the swing up. Let's see if we want to run it from, well, actually from this last, wherever this last setup was here. I think there was one down here. So what I would do is you can use symmetry for a stop. And basically you take 100% of these prior declines, and actually the largest one is the most important. And I project them from the high. And typically I'd have a stop underneath there. Because if it breaks the symmetry of this swing, you're probably getting a deeper downside correction that you don't want to sit through. So symmetry on a lower time frame chart is one way to set a stop. So let me make sure that I've got this here. So this is this high to this low, projected from here. Oh, actually that did come in a little bit lower. So that looks like it's the largest swing. That was $11.15. Again, you can have a stop underneath there. Or if you really want to play it tight because it's, you know, I mean, it's very well extended in this case, Apple. And, you know, you'll notice something about Apple. I haven't set you up on the sell side in Apple for a long, long time. And again, it has a lot to do with this. I mean, the bullish pattern and all the moving averages on the buy side. That's why I'm typically telling you, you know, when we get to those target decisions, not really to short it, because I don't have anything major that tells me that a high's in place. Okay, so let's go back to that. So, you know, that's one way. You can use stops on a lower time frame chart, but how about if you wanted to play it tighter? How about having a stop underneath the prior swing low? It's not like you can't go back in. And this has been a huge move, and it's met multiple extensions. Actually, this should not have this template. That would be the 834. Okay, so the first way would be using symmetry. The second way would be by just placing, you know, trail it up, you know, place it under the prior swing low. Well, this one, that might have stopped you out if you would have used that one. This one's a little bit more obvious. You can have a stop underneath there. Now, the other way you can look at it is you can say, well, if it has the crossover back to the downside, but I wouldn't use that as much, okay? Because you'll notice that initially when something triggers, a lot of times you'll see the moving averages go back and forth. I don't want you to enter and then exit here, okay? Once you get your initial trigger, okay, you don't get out if it crosses back the other way for a few minutes, okay? Your original or your initial stop is underneath here or underneath the zone. So again, you can use symmetry for stops, or you can use prior swing lows or prior swing highs, depending on which direction you're coming from. Or if you want to say, well, you know what, it's following this, you know, the 8's above the 34. how about I'll just get out if we cross back down below it. You can use it, but there's one other thing that I don't know how to tell you to do it, but average true range maybe on a lower time frame chart might be good to use for stops. All right, let me see what some of these other questions are. Okay, you know, I thought I've said this a few times, but again, on the daily charts, I use the 200 simple and the 50 simple. Then I use the 513 exponential. And on the intraday charts, I use the 834 exponential. Let me see what else we have. Okay, so you're asking, was this what I call a royal setup? I don't know what chart you're talking about. So what chart were you talking about? Okay, I thought that this was just everybody that was in my service. So maybe maybe they put it out to everybody. So again, a royal setup. Okay, here's a great example of a royal setup. This is Google. We had a symmetrical pullback within an uptrend. Price was above the 200, above the 50, and the 5 and 13 were in a buy mode. That was a royal setup. It rallied $135 from that simple symmetry plus a couple of other price relationships. All right, let me see what else I'm missing here. Yeah, I can't seem to move this correctly. I don't know about filling gaps. I mean, to me, my work is just these setups. So, you know, I don't want to make any assumptions about gaps being filled or not, because that's not really part of my work. Okay, so can one use the guidelines for ETFs? Like, yeah, I mean, I put out, actually, I had put out the GDX on the free video yesterday. Now, this was not a royal setup, but it's still a setup. You're above the 200. When you tested the support, you were below the 50, and the 5 and 13 are in a sell mode. But so far it is holding, and I also had timing. So I had time and price at 30.54 to 31.28. So yeah, you can use this work on ETFs. Somebody's asking me a question about my my book versus the site. Well, all I can tell you is that the only thing that I do not have in the book is the counter trend trade setups. I don't talk about counter trend trades at all in my book. And after a few years, you know, I realized that, you know, because I was getting a lot of requests for certain stocks, and there were counter trend trades. But when I had time, price, and extensions, a lot of times they were good trades. So I want to also be able to do those. So I would have to do a separate session on counter trend trades. That's the only thing that's not in the book. I don't know if this HTZ would have given me anything or not. Honestly, I don't do any kind of scans or anything. I mean, I've already have a ton of charts that I'm looking at, so. Yeah, and I usually don't play a whole lot with stuff underneath 20 bucks. I mean, obviously it doesn't mean that you can't, but I don't. I mean, there, I'm sure you would have found there would have been a buy signal on a, you know, 5-minute chart or something like that. Let me see. How do I use timing? I do timing both with the outright cycles, and then I use the histogram. So what I'm going to give you for that is my videos, because I have some videos on YouTube that are really good. So this is just a trigger example with an index setup. This is over an hour on timing. This is the basics that I did 3 months ago. I think this is also on the site. And this is just a very quick video, just 2 minutes on what are you going to look for as far as timing is concerned. If the market is going straight up into timing, you anticipate a failure. If the market's going straight down into timing, you anticipate, you know, a possible bottom being put in. When the market's going sideways into timing, ignore it, because it has no predictive value there. I mean, you might break out of a sideways move, but you know, otherwise it doesn't have predictive value. Here's the one on the color codes of the lines. This is a 48-minute video on symmetry. Symmetry is one of the main, you know, building blocks of all my setups. Then you can also look at, you know, the toss projection tool. They actually call it an extension tool. I don't care what they call it. You need 3 points if you're going to compare swings in the same direction. Then we have the retracement tool, where you do both the retracements and extensions, because they're only coming from 2 points. This goes over the day trading plan. It's a walkthrough. This is, I did, for anybody who was interested in the dynamic trader stuff, this is how you set it up, you know, to work. So that's, you may not need to look at that. And then also you want to look at how to use triggers. All right, and that goes over using triggers for day trade decisions and swing trade decisions. So that's something else that you want to look at. So let me give you the link for that. I'm just going to send it to everybody. Hopefully that comes through. All right, let's get this out of the way. All right, let me see if I can get down to these last questions here. Okay, good. Okay, how does the timing work for Apple that you gave? And that's where I get confused. Well, yeah. So hang on, let me just get rid of this. Where is my Apple chart? I think it's under here. Yeah. There have been timing cycles before, and sometimes it turns the market for a pullback. Sometimes it becomes a more important high. Sometimes it doesn't move at all. But timing is more of information. You know, it can really help you manage a trade, because, you know, if you're going straight up into resistance in price and resistance in time, that tells you to anticipate a possible pullback. And if you don't want to sit through one of those, then how about you really tighten up your stops using a lower time frame chart? Okay, would you want to sit through a $92 pullback in Google? I mean, my guess is no. But then again, I guess some of you may be much longer term oriented. But yeah, this tells you, I mean, I don't want you really to use this for a short unless you're super nimble and you know exactly what you're doing. But I want you to use it as a reason to have a really tight stop, because let's see how many cycles we have. Looks like, well, just looks like 3 on the 9th, 3 cycles. Plus you've extended this move, and this is target number 2. And you know that so far that's been a rally of $1.35. Oh, let me see if I can get these. Okay. All right. So hopefully that helps. What other questions do you guys have on, I mean, you can also use, like daily charts. Like if it tests a zone, you can use the daily zone for a day trade by just using like a 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute chart for a trigger. Now, obviously you can't use a 5 minute chart or a 15-minute chart for a swing trade. You really want to look at the daily, like the larger, daily decisions. But we haven't had a new buy setup on the daily chart since this last low was made. So right now, more of the work has been done, on the shorter term charts. A lot of times when I don't have something setting up on the daily chart, I just look for secondary entries against the original setup on the lower time frame. So this didn't show up on the daily chart, but it certainly showed up, for support at 1403 to 06 here. And we definitely met target number 1 off of that. But bottom line, it's setup plus trigger equals trade entry, and then you manage it. Use the timing for information. Like if you have time and price come together, it's definitely worth looking at. But obviously, time and price coming together for a pullback within an uptrend is going to be a better trade setup than time and price resistance within an uptrend. One's trend and one's counter trend. The trend setups will be the better setups. Against what you know and what I envision. So this low to high swing was 1046.94. Projected from here gives you 32.38. The high was 32.33 so far, and this swing was 1041.27. This would be a place to watch for resistance. Now, if you had this, and if you're okay with what we consider a counter trend trade, you can look for a trigger against this and see if it, gives you a pullback. But one of the things that you should also know is that I'm going to continue to set up the pullbacks on the buy side. I mean, our last one, simple symmetry here. And if we continue to hold above here, your initial upside target's 32.42. Now your initial trigger, okay, so 31.89. Let me just look at this one. Okay, not a 15-minute chart. Okay, so this would be a 1-minute chart. And you would have had a couple triggers against this area, and we never took out that support. So initial triggers looks like there was one around this 31.97 area. There was another one over here after it retested that support. And then also you can use a 377 tick chart. I'm not sure if it'll show up in here. It was at 31.89. Yeah, that was back. Nope, it was even lower than that. So I can't really show it to you on this chart unless I can, yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, here it is. Okay, so here's the 377 tick chart. I'm just going to blow up this part here. Okay, so there was one signal here. There was another signal right here. As far as, let's see, setups, I'm always going to look at a daily chart first. If the daily chart does not offer me enough information, then I will go down to a 30-minute chart. Or I'm sorry, I meant if there's not enough information on the daily chart, then I go down to or I go up to a weekly chart. And then I fine tune entries on a 30-minute chart. And actually, sometimes you only get the entries on the 30-minute chart. This setup did not show up on the daily chart. It only showed up on the 30-minute chart. And yet we did have, very, very healthy rally from it. So I typically will start with daily work unless I need higher, and then go down to the 30-minute chart. And that's pretty much it. I will look at 120-minute charts in some of them. Here's an example in, okay, let's see. Okay, like gold. This was a setup. We had price work, 1664 to 71. That was mostly symmetry and a 1618 extension. And I had timing also. Now I didn't have all the moving averages in the right place. Price was above the 200. Price was below the 50 when we tested support, and also the 5 and 13 were in a sell mode when we tested the support. So this is not as high a probability as the pullback that we had in Facebook. However, so far you've rallied, oh, and I also have some time resistance, $57 off of this time and price decision. So now this is where you kind of manage it, because if we cannot clear 1731.43, we could fail. So you wouldn't leave your stop down here. You would get it closer to, current levels. But if we can push through here, then yeah, I'm going to look for an upside of 1819. If we fail, I have to look for an extension to the downside instead. Twitter was an old setup. So this one has already basically hit and held and triggered. So this one I gave out a while back in Twitter. And again, all it is, I'm trying to use the ratios to help you get a good entry within the uptrend. And we had symmetry here. These swings were similar. Let's see, look at, okay, so this swing was $3.98. This one was $4. This one was $4.31. Okay, so those couple ones were similar with this. So we ended up holding against that symmetry support. That was the setup. I can show you where the first triggers would have been on like a 15-minute chart. Okay, so it was 30.28. So on a 15-minute chart, okay, so here's where we tested I believe that's where we tested the support. Here's the moving average crossover, and here you took out a prior swing high. So that would have been your trigger, and your stop would have been right underneath here, or underneath the low end of the zone, either way. And then it's met two targets on the upside. So what are you supposed to do now? You're supposed to ratchet up your stops. If it wants to give you more on the upside, great. But it's already met two targets off of that setup. Now I do have a bigger picture upside target, which comes in at 44.98, and that's basically just an extension off of this swing. Okay, but I'd rather wait for, see if we get another similar pullback. I haven't set it up yet. As far as the, not spider, I do the SPX as far as timing. I do have, let's see, high to high cycle June 10th, high to high cycle June 12th, Low to low cycle, June 9th. Is this a low? Looks like another low to low, 618 on the 11th. So the 9th through the 12th, I have some timing factors. Now, does that mean it's definitely going to roll over? No. But if you start seeing some sell triggers, the cycles are supporting you. Yeah, and I already had, so Crude. Okay, so this was one of the setups in Crude today. Here. Okay, this secondary area that just was blown through. But this was basically 50%, a 618, and a 100% projection of another swing. We ended up making the low at 37.97 and it rallied $1.34. Now I tried to set it up again, but this one was blown through. So this has no value anymore. But this was a setup. I'm sure it triggered on, lower time frame charts and you had a beautiful rally off of it. So you met more than, let's see. Yeah, so the 1272 and the 1618 target were met on that one. Now, as far as Crude on a daily chart, I have timing, well, the 8th, 9th. I had the 5th through the 9th, so that was Friday through Tuesday. So far, the high has been made on the 8th. And here's the thing. It was a little bit shorter resistance, but this is really important. If it holds above here or here, then it's easier to look for another swing up. But if we break the symmetry of this upswing by declining for more than the largest decline within this swing, then, that's a warning for at least a deeper downside correction. But as far as immediate decisions, if we stay above this support, you can look at the buy side. But, we still have a chance to retest this area 36.92 to 37.17. But note that I am doing the August contract because I know that I don't know 100% what's going on with Crude right now, but I know that you weren't able to, I guess, get out or initiate new positions. Okay, so we've pretty much done this for an hour. Are there any last questions? I just want you to get a better idea of, what you can look at. Now, obviously, I haven't had like this last setup on the daily chart was way back here. So all of my other trade setups have been, on the 120-minute charts and 30-minute charts. Yeah, I'm not gonna, I don't have RTX and I'm not here to do the analysis on it right now. That's what I do in those breakout sessions. I'm more concerned with you understanding, what the setups are on the charts. So let me just go through a few of those real quick. Okay, not that one. Well, this was a setup. Let's just check. Let me just go through this stocks instead. Yeah, so I don't really have anything on the daily chart in Apple. This was a setup. That was a cluster setup. This is going to be a symmetry setup. Now, it's not a super tight range, but if we trade down into this area, you go down to a lower time frame chart and it triggers an entry, you can take the trade and then define your risk underneath that support. I mean, a lot of these markets are overdone. I mean, we've just almost met two targets on the upside in Amazon. Okay, and we've been, trading that one from the buy side for a while. Why? Because you're above the 200, you're above the 50, 5 and 13 are in a buy mode. Actually, yeah. So again, this does help you stay on the right side. We had the 513 crossover down here. It hasn't turned back down yet. So am I going to try and short this market? I wouldn't try and short it. I mean, some traders might use the extensions for a day trade or something, but you don't necessarily want to keep it overnight because all the moving averages are supporting the bulls. Facebook. Okay, on the daily chart, this was a setup. This was a setup. These are just the targets. So I don't really consider these setups. I consider these targets off of this, you know, that last decision or those last couple of decisions. Google, you know, this was the last setup on the daily chart. I haven't had anything new since then, but I have had entries via a 30-minute chart. This is a setup. This is 3 price relationships. Tomorrow, this will be a setup. It's a little bit wide as far as the zone is concerned, but you know, maybe you use a 2-minute or 1-minute, 2-minute, 5-minute chart if you want to look for a day trade decision. Microsoft, that was our last daily setup, simple symmetry, and it met some targets today. A new setup would be below the market, where this support is or where this support is. And but it's only good if we don't take out this high, because if a new high is made, everything has to be recalculated from the new high for the next support. Netflix, this was our last buy decision. We had a sell decision from symmetry, and it did, you know, it did start to work. It was this low to this high, projected from the low. And you see how it capped it, and it dropped from there to, so that was about $24 pullback. Okay. This is a setup, but I would consider this a counter trend setup. 435, you know, it's a 2-step pattern. But the moving averages, except for the 513, are on the side of the bulls. I didn't set up a new buy yet. A lot of people will ask me, you know, give them a buy zone. And I can't give them a buy zone because you don't have a pullback. I need a pullback to set up a pullback. So I can't give you a buy zone yet. We had support back here. That's about it. NVIDIA was not a perfect hit, but like, let's say, so 318.04 was the top end. The actual low was 319.87. So it was close, you know, but just a teeny bit short of it. But as long as you're okay to risk underneath the, you know, the low or underneath the zone, you can still look at the trade. You can still look at triggers. And then Tesla. Oh, yeah, so NVIDIA, a new buy setup would be either the 350, 356 area or 350, 351 area. Tesla, the last buy setup was simple symmetry, and it looks like nothing. Let me just see if this is correct though. Low to high. Yeah, 96 bucks. Off of, again, simple symmetry. And you find that with the 3-pointed tool. Yeah, I'm not sure which swing it came from, but so there's no real setup there now. This is just one that's playing out. We actually met 2 targets on the upside. A new buy decision. Now, here's where you don't have one standout decision. But if the market, say, it breaks through the higher step and it tests this and it holds, go down to the lower time frame chart and look for a buy trigger. There's no way that I can post triggers all day long for 1-minute charts or 5-minute charts or 15-minute charts or any of that. So that's why I just teach you how to, you know, look at the triggers. And let's see, so we had a couple others. Let's just go over some of the extra charts. So again, BABA, nice setup here. It didn't have all the moving averages immediately, but we still have potential to the 1272 target. But hey, if you're in it now, you know, from back here, how about you have a stop underneath here? Okay, I mean, I'd like to see it make the target, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. ZM is still a setup right here. If we continue to hold above here, my target's 232. If we break underneath here, I'm wrong, at least on that setup. Roku. Roku had time and price at that low. It hit, it held, it triggered. Now the question is whether it continues to clear hurdles to meet a target, minimum target of 149.29. Shop is retesting a cluster, and I think it triggered again today on the buy side. Didn't pull back far enough for Lulu. TDOC did a retest of support and re-triggered. Now it needs to clear this hurdle for a target of 219. And again, at least you know where you're wrong. I'm wrong either underneath this low or underneath the low end of the zone. And if you use spreads, you know, spreads are a little bit more forgiving, you know, option spreads, like debit spreads. Some people like to use credit spreads. This was a setup in target. It has not made the target. I don't know if it's going to, but the target would be 129.16. VZ is just short of a minor target off of, you know, this support decision. Target is 1272, that swing. GDX, time and price at this last low. I don't know if it's going to continue to rally, so how about you at least have a break-even stop? PANW gave a new signal after it retested support. If we continue to hold, 248 is your target. You know, and one of the things, if you're in the service, please watch the end-of-day videos, because that's, you know, that's where I give you a little bit more color about the market, because during the day, you know, I'm just trying to get all the updated charts out. This was a beautiful setup in TTD. I know it's made the targets off of this low. Yep, you made two targets off of that low, but then you also have a target off of this swing, and that's the 1272 at 374. So this one, you know, since you've made two targets already, it's a good one to have a relatively tight stop. Beyond simple symmetry, a lot of people were getting frustrated here until we had that day. And I don't know what the news was, but, or they had some new distribution deal or something. Yeah, Win has more than one decision. It's at resistance on a weekly chart. That's something to be aware of. But you really can't expect it to go down unless it starts breaking through these supports. And like we had a setup in tandem, but you can't expect it to go to the target unless we can push through these hurdles that are coming from these swings and the retracements. And yeah, that's Ulta's at resistance. Walmart, pretty simple, just this high to low is 1260. This high to low is 1253. If it holds above there, yes, you can see a rally. Boeing, you know, all I did was set up some of the pullback decisions as far as support. But that's all I have. You know, like 208, 212 is going to be your next setup. And then I did the free video on this one today. I don't even know what the stock does. AEM. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But bottom line, you want to, you know, you want to look at the setups with triggers, and then you want to manage it. If you're still confused with the stops, you can always ask me, you know, on a particular trade where I would put a stop. Do I ever factor Elliott wave into it? No, I don't, because I suck at it. Okay. I know that my work dovetails with it, but if I tried to make a count, forget it. I would embarrass myself. So I'm going to let the Elliott wave experts do that. And I just do this because this is what I specialize in. But it does dovetail quite a bit. I think my stock wave stuff is separate. I mean, it's within stock waves, but it's a separate subscription, I think. Honestly, I don't even know. Yeah, and again, I'm not gonna do any more charts at the moment, but you know, we talked for about over an hour, so I'm going to quit here. If you guys have any questions, you can always email me. Yeah, I'll give you an email. So if you didn't get a question answered, that's the one to send it to. But I think it's time for a cocktail. Because I've been sitting in this chair since about 6:15 this morning. All right. Well, I hope it helped. It takes a little while to kind of get used to what I'm, trying to give you. Maybe for some of this stuff, maybe I just have to write setup on the chart. But know that the 3 setups that I look for, symmetry setups and 2-step pattern setups and Fibonacci price clusters, which are 3 or more price relationships. All of those 3, that's what I look for every single day. Alrighty, thanks for joining me, and I hope it helped.